All right. Alex, is AI killing SEO?
Or just killing bad SEO? That's the question.
Or is it resurfacing bad SEO?
What is SEO? If we really get down on the brass tacks.
What do these letters mean?
We have SEO is like you're optimizing for a channel, right? Search as a channel. It's a distribution lever. But what are you delivering through that channel? Content, information, brand, navigational, commercial, like all the different query types. So something exists. You want to get it in the hands of somebody else. That's an end user. That's a reader. That's a college student. That's a college professor. That's a David, Ali, or Alex who is searching for an answer to our business problems. And SEO is the method by which we optimize the delivery of the thing to the person, right? So is that dead? No, obviously not. Do things still exist? And do people still exist that want those things or that information? That's still alive and well. Even the data, I think Rand at Spark Toro has put out data with Datos. Is that the company?
Sounds familiar. Yes.
Clickstream data on, users of Google search versus like ChatGPT users, and like LLM users are growing consistently over time.
Both are growing.
Searches per month. I think searches per month is not growing in terms of like Google search. I think that's actually been relatively static. I don't know the exact data, but whatever. It's static or growing. It's not shrinking in any way. So like the demand is there. The people who are searching for information is there. Presumably the information is also there, right? Or the companies that they're trying to find. The mechanism by which you find it is changing. Mm-hmm. So it's not killing it. Mm. It's killing the value of certain information, like information that was not scarce. If it's not scarce, if it's consensus information, then, if you think of like the value of a website saying the definition of a CRM, AI overviews eat that up. Feature snippets before that ate that up. ChatGPT eats that up. Mm-hmm. And now the value to the publisher is what changed. So,
I mean, think of like if we just use that same query of like, what is a CRM? Like you Google it and then you get like 20, 30 results of different companies writing the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you are a CRM company, you're not the only one losing all this traffic. It's all your competitors who are also losing that, because I, as someone looking for a CRM, just gets whatever definition or even recommendations immediately in that Google AI overview. And so I think this is top of mind for me, because I'm even just having a lot of conversations with clients or prospects who come to me and say, we're losing a lot of traffic to AI. We want to get it back. And I asked them like, well, what pages are you losing traffic to? And lo and behold, it's a lot of the more definitional, not differentiated type of content, to the point where I just had a sales call and the person said, we don't want to do any of that anymore because we know it's not valuable. And this is someone I used to work with. And so she's very read in onto what they want to do and what they don't want to do. But it raises the question of whether this traffic trap that we've talked about for years is resurfacing in a different form, where people are saying, we're losing traffic to AI overviews or ChatGPT or whatever. We want to get that back. And then the question I always pose is, well, was that even converting? Was there any business value to it at all? Yeah. Maybe there was. You want to dig into it, but don't always assume immediately that it is actually negative or like having a negative impact on business value. And ask yourself the question of like, what's the trade-off of trying to reclaim this traffic versus perhaps adjusting your strategy to then focus on getting the right people to your site, where we've been able to work with clients who, traffic goes down, but guess what? Leads in pipeline are actually either flat or going up, because we're focused on getting people who are like in a buying cycle or more relevant to the target audience that they're going after.
Yeah. Is that page, like if it weren't delivered through SEO, would you still want it on your website? Yeah. It's a pretty easy heuristic to ask yourself. And the answer is actually yes in a lot of cases too. So I don't think it's necessary that, because an AI overview ate your traffic, that it's a bad topic. You might actually want to define what a CRM is and what you think a CRM is, especially if you're like building a new paradigm on it, that still might actually have value on your website. So I think you can actually divorce those concepts. Mm-hmm.
Are you all seeing any patterns in who has those concerns based on title, size of the company, anything like that?
I was going to say that when we talk about AI killing SEO or SEO is dead, we actually never break down what that means or who says that. And I was thinking that actually that's only something that like publishers say, and not just publishers, but people who have been used to a certain type of SEO content. Like affiliate sites, they'll say that, right? Because their traffic is like actually their mechanism by which they monetize their websites.
Yeah.
You never hear SEO is dead from a consumer.
No.
So who's saying it from a title side? Like who's saying like, oh, like
well, no,
traffic, you know?
I'm asking, well, that's yes. And what roles are you seeing say, I want that traffic back?
I'll answer that in two ways. So one are like CEOs or CMOs who are not as close to the work. Where if our point of contact is in demand or SEO, they're actually like, yeah, it's not killing it. We know it's not killing it because people are still coming to our site and organic is still our biggest channel for driving pipeline right now. But we want to stay ahead and know that there's some iteration and nuances that we need to be mindful of. The second bucket are people on LinkedIn not actually doing the work and like hypothesizing and playing out these scenarios where even if it did happen, it's going to take a while for it to happen. And maybe there are consultants trying to get some clients based on FOMO. That seems to be happening a good amount right now.
Yeah, because I've had more of the experience of like, I know our traffic is going down. I don't love it. You know, like we've had to reorient how we define success. We've had to change the nature of the conversation to my CMO or my CEO. But we know that it's basically just like a shedding of irrelevant traffic. Like it's an adjustment to match the change in buyer behavior. So like we don't love to see it. We'd obviously want all charts up and to the right. But our goal is to like make sure we maintain performance across those pages that are driving business and then put our energy elsewhere, looking more so at conversions and revenue, with traffic maybe being a leading indicator. But even still, like the project I'm thinking about, conversions were up and to the right while traffic went down and to the right, and it continues like that. So that was an interesting conversation to have, but these were like performance-based folks, content and SEO rolled up to their head of growth. And so it just is interesting. We've talked a lot in our podcast about how all these teams are changing, reporting structure is changing, a lot of cross-functional collaboration. And I've noticed a bit of a pattern between who has those heavy concerns. And I think it's those folks that are used to traffic being like, this is my KPI. And then they're obviously subject to scrutiny right now. But
if you take it at face value that your KPI is meaningful, I could see that being frightening. But if you think from like first principles, what you're trying to do, and you're very close to the problem, I see a lot of the SEOs that we work with are very keyed in to what's happening. It's like probably a fundamental, like an attribution and analytics issue more than anything. And then also the paradigm that you're approaching organic with. If you assume, and this might not be true, that there's a sort of stable amount of demand, people have money, right? The macroeconomic factors aside, people have a certain amount of money and a certain amount of problems, and there's a certain amount of products that exist. So let's assume that demand is stable. And then you're seeing traffic drop, which is like a measurement you're using to approximate the value of your website or your content. I'm thinking in analogies now. It's like if you were running a restaurant and you had a sensor, not a sensor, like if you had a key card at the door for people who walked into your restaurant, you as a restaurant owner could feasibly say, all right, this is a great way to track how many people come to my restaurant. And I can measure that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I can see that on Wednesdays, I have the highest foot traffic, thus the most customers. And that's been growing year over year, month over month, and it drops in the summertime. That's seasonality. You as the restaurant owner could also say, that's a pretty high amount of friction to impose on my customers to like have a key card, remember to bring it, and swipe that when they come in. So you might say, all right, let's eliminate that. We're going to lower the friction, which is analogously an AI overview, right? There's less friction to information. The same amount of people might come to your restaurant. So now how do you measure that value? Is it the amount of money you make, which would be the revenue in the pipeline? Now that may be distributed differently. Maybe somebody comes in a side door, right? Maybe, you have to measure like that lagging indicator and you say like, all right, well, I now don't really know. Maybe your key cards had imprinted like how they discovered you in the first place, whether that was through a brochure, through a friend, et cetera. So now you don't have that information. Now all you have is the money in your cash register. So now you just have to measure things differently. Can you ask people at the table, how did you find out about us? Self-reported attribution. You're delivering the same amount of value to the same amount of customers. You're just tracking it differently.
Yeah.
Is that too heady? Is that
No, I mean, I'm following. And what's funny is you were talking about that, as I was like, just pay attention to the register.
Right.
Like why? Because there could be a lot of people coming in that don't buy anything, and like that probably doesn't matter.
I was going to say that's you can't just measure the amount of people who walk through the door, because maybe some people sit at the table, just order a coffee and sit for 4 hours, and But if you just measure the register, you can't really analyze your marketing spend and like how those people came in through the door. Right.
You can't double down on
and
what's working.
And that's the problem with incremental pipeline when you just measure it in aggregate is now some of that is being redistributed through, homepage traffic, people finding you in ChatGPT, and you can't measure the click from a URL to your website. So now you're like, all right, well, how the hell do I think about how to spend money on marketing acquisition if I don't know if that person came through the homepage because a friend told them about us, because our SEO content is being found through ChatGPT or some other way. It's just this big bucket of like dark SEO.
I think coming at this from a different angle too, like we alluded a couple of times to like a certain type of content not doing well with AI search anymore. Like that's where the traffic is being cannibalized. And Alex, you presented this point of like, well, it doesn't mean you don't want that content on your site. And I've heard like research being done. I don't quote me on this because I'll need to like find the research and link to it, of folks saying, hey, even if that page may not be driving traffic to your site directly, if that top of funnel stuff gets cited, there's a higher likelihood that your bottom of funnel, more transactional pages will also get cited and served in these AI overviews. So that is something that I'm going to find that research and link to it, but that's important to consider too. And it makes it less obvious of like, do we just create a bunch of bottom of funnel product listicles? Like, is that an internet we want to also live in, where like that's the strategy every single company is doing? And we were saying this off camera around like, do we just end up in this world where people are producing these listicles and it's a resurfacing of these cheap SEO tactics?
I was thinking about that with some of the research that's coming out on AI citation sources. And you'll hear constantly like, oh, listicles and comparison content dominates citations in AI engines. And I haven't dug into the research methodology to this great of an extent, but is that merely a function of what prompts we're tracking in the first place? Because you could say the same thing if all you analyzed in SERPs was queries around best SEO software, best SEO agencies, best compliance software. You could extrapolate that query into the intent. Basically, what you're asking with that query is like, give me a list of the top solutions in the market, right? And if you're asking for a list of the top solutions in the market, the search engine's results page is going to be a bunch of lists. And I think this is with LLMs, you're only going to get recommended in an output if your input is asking for an output of brand recommendations or product recommendations, right? So if your research is just a bunch of prompts for best solutions, give me the top solutions in the US for this, and that, obviously the makeup of the citation sources is going to be a bunch of listicles. Yeah. So is this just like a sampling bias is my question.
Well, I think it's the same when people are like measuring visibility, and it's something that we pay close attention to on like the inputs obviously really influence the type, like what you're saying, the type of output and like the frequency with which a brand is mentioned. So I encourage our team, like when we report on visibility or use it as a conversation point with clients, like filter out branded prompts and also alternative prompts, because it's going to surface more brands. Like we really more so want to see like moving up the funnel a bit, like how frequently the brand is mentioned. But a lot of clients are like, I've literally had a client ask, like, I think you're just biasing this data because I saw a bunch of branded prompts. And I was like, no, we filter those out, but I understand your concern. And those are the questions that you should be asking, because it's very easy to manipulate the data in those ways.
Yeah. Well, probably a similar mental model applies to the traditional funnel, so to speak, right? We've always indexed on closer to in-market queries. And that's what you're seeing with prompts, and like a lot of LLM, AI search recommendations are like focus on the bottom of the funnel. That's like layer one. And then if you go up to layer two, it's like middle of the funnel, somebody who is feasibly a, target buyer of your product, what pain points they would have before they understand what the solution landscape looks like or what product category to search for. The measurement layer is much harder there. I think that's why we're seeing the SEO is dead, or like AI is killing SEO conversation, is because there's still influence happening when somebody searches in ChatGPT, like I'm having trouble sleeping, or I have tons of unstructured data that I don't know how to analyze, or, my Google Drive is unwieldy and I need governance, to properly like partition user access, right? Those are problems that would end up resulting in, a brand developed theanine, a AI native CRM, or a digital asset management system. But somebody might not know that those products exist. So they're still going to search those things at that problem aware stage. Sometimes those prompts may result in product recommendations, but not always. So what's the measurement protocol that you use to say that you're actually impacting the customer journey and your influence within it? The best I can use right now is citation share. So how often you're showing up as a citation source. It's not perfect because not a lot of people look at the citations, especially in ChatGPT, pull up that right-hand sidebar and say, oh, these 30 pages are what's influencing it. Whereas like if you're directly mentioned as a product, you can point to that and use Peak or Profound or any of the myriad softwares that show that. Mm-hmm. And then the top of the funnel, what is it? It's people still search for those things, but like what is the influence that you're injecting into the conversation? How do you track that? That's what's much harder now.
Yeah.
Not that it doesn't matter. I think that stuff still matters.
I want to ask Alec a question. Going a different direction, because me and Alex kind of joked about it before you came into the room of like what we have in our notes here is like our content writer, is the content writer role dead? And I want to reframe that because there are two conversations that come to mind right now in terms of how it sounds like SEO content editorial teams are being structured, or like the skill set folks are looking for. On one hand, I just spoke to someone that I used to work with. She's running like a marketing and content team at this B2B SaaS company. And she's like, we're not doing any of the crappy SEO content anymore. Like, we don't believe in that stuff. That's not what we want our brand to be known for. Everyone I hire has actually been a person that has bought our product in the past. Like, it's a recruiting software. They do not have any marketing backgrounds, and I trained them as marketers.
Wow.
And now they have the SME expertise. They're like, they don't need to interview an SME. They just inherently know that. And now they're becoming marketers and speaking to other ex-recruiters or current recruiters.
That's cool.
And so their approach is, we're going to produce the best content from folks who have actually been in role of our ICP. And we're not trying to churn out a bunch of content, but it's going to be high quality. And the people who read it are really going to resonate with it. Mm-hmm. That's one bucket. The second bucket, and I've spoke to a client who's doing planning for next year right now. And they said, our goal is output. We're trying to publish 700 pages and we're trying to optimize 300 pages. Let's use those as just examples. And in my mind, I think these guys are solid. They're SEOs, they know what they're doing, and they're measuring everything, looking at leads and pipeline and all of that. But their play is velocity. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I kind of lean more towards the velocity side of things because I do tend to think that quicker iterations, more feedback loops, more data, see what works, double down on what works. But you come from more of an editorial background. And now you've, I think, become more like SEO and technical. Like, how do you see the editorial, like, content side of SEO, AI search, and all of that forming?
That's many, many questions in one.
I know.
I mean, the first question I have is this Velocity client. Who are they selling to?
I don't want to say without exposing who they are.
Well, I guess like the title, like
they're selling to very technical, like security teams, CISOs.
Okay, because like I think when I think about content programs, and I always ask this to my prospects, I'm like, who's the tire kicker and who's the decision maker? Because I think content creation, optimization, like visibility online, should appeal to all the roles at the table who are helping make the decision. But there's somebody out there doing the research, like running into this content online. And that's typically like who you back into when you're thinking about like queries or prompts to optimize for. And then you think like you're on your short list. I'm talking about the buyer journey right now. You get on the short list, depending on like the complexity and the investment size. There's also like a process of internal buy-in, usually appealing to internal decision makers, probably C-suite, especially if it's a really big ticket item. And I'm thinking like a recruiting software, it's likely not the head of HR I mean, maybe. I guess I'm making a lot of assumptions right now, but depending on the size of the company and the size of the deal, there's probably like a recruiting coordinator or somebody doing research. And depending on what they're searching for, their knowledge of the space, they're probably going to bump into some of that more classic SEO type content when they're looking for like how to streamline interviews or whatever. But then when it gets to like you've shortlisted, you're making probably a 6 or even 7-figure investment. I don't know. I can see that really detailed, really thoughtful, I guess we'll use thought leadership for lack of a better term, content, not only helping appeal and help that one brand stand out if they're like neck and neck, maybe feature wise or whatever, but also appeal to and educate like a head of HR or like a CHRO. So I can see that play, but the velocity play, depending on where they sit, like if they're up against a large incumbent or they're like really trying to break into a space, I can see that as more of like a foundations or a scale play, just like a pure frequency, like getting my name out there, being everywhere. Like if you have the budget, covering all parts of the funnel, like have your what is content, maybe lower your expectations on what that can drive for you. But I can see both. I would probably want to understand more about like the buying journey and where these two teams and two companies sit in the market, because I think there's also something to be said about like you're emergent, your foundation, like you're on your foundations level, you have a very small website, not very authoritative, maybe small budget. And then I would imagine the velocity client's likely in the scale section, like in the middle. And then I would imagine the larger client is probably in leadership. They have a lot of budget. They've proven, like your contact has proven that she's trustworthy to leadership, because that's also kind of a gamble of sorts. Like I'd want to understand her measurement framework for like, what does good look like for these really intentional pieces? Like how are we measuring success? I mean, I know who you're talking about, so I think she's very smart and she's thought through all of that. But with that comes proving your value in that role. Like if I stepped into a role like that and pitched that program out the gate, I'd probably be laughed at, So it's like that to me tells me that they've established leadership and they have a little bit more creativity in that regard. As for like how content folds into all of this, you started this off by saying, is the content writer role dead? I made this bet, what was it, a year ago, 2 years ago? I don't think anything's dead. You just kind of walked through really what we mean by that. Again, it's an it depends answer, which I know doesn't give much, but I think being brought in to just produce without any kind of automation, intelligence with AI tooling, proximity to the ICP and or the product, and to purely drive traffic, I think that is dead. I think content writers are valuable if your product is highly complex and also changes a lot. Maybe it's in a growth stage. So to continue to educate external teams or external writers is hard. We do that and we do it well, but I can see like working with a freelancer who doesn't know, how to grow with your company. I can see having an internal writer, at least one, sitting with the team and being able to be privy to all of that flux. And I think if you're a full-time writer and you're in-house, you need to be prepared to produce anything and everything written, not just like a blog or not just SEO. You should ghostwrite for your CEO. You should generate press releases, do original research, like being a jack of all trades, supplemented by automation to move faster. Because depending on the expected return on your work, you might be charged with fast production. That's just a mental model. I think a lot of different teams do it. And we've seen clients have in-house writers or no in-house writers. And it's a very interesting question. I think it's one that we should keep talking about.
I still find just the point on velocity or throughput incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
Because that question's been asked for like a decade or more, which is like content quality versus quantity. And it's not just in content. We're speaking in the SEO ecosystem, but back in my days in experimentation, that was a constant question too. People would frame it differently. The way I look at it, like you're always trying to solve for expected value in a program. You're trying to lower the cost. You're increasing the probability of success and the magnitude of success, right? It's a mathematical formula, but over time you want to like increase your success rate and lower your costs and ROI. And there were 3 ways to do that in the realm of experimentation, generally speaking, which is to run more experiments. So if you have an average hit rate of a 1 out of 10, experiments win and pay back and like are improving revenue or whatever, if you run 10x the experiments, you're going to get 10 winners as opposed to 1. You can improve the percentage win rate, which would assume a higher quality bar for the experiments you are running. Now, there's a bunch of assumptions inherent in that, which is like to what degree can you improve the probability of a win? Like, do you have the power to break down what a successful experiment is, and what is the cost of doing so? Like, there's a trade-off between like how many experiments you can run, velocity, and the time it takes to like set up the perfect experiment, so to speak. And then there's the increase the size of the win. So generally, that would be, instead of optimizing micro components or pages that don't have a lot of traffic, you're swinging for the fences. You're doing like radical redesigns and like hoping for, a 200% increase as opposed to like a 2% increase. And you can pull that model into every other domain too. You could think about that with original research and digital PR. The hit rate there, or the success rate, would be how many publications pick up a narrative or a story, right? And if you increase the percentage hit rate, that's like the quality of the experiment. You could also run 10x the amount of research. Where this gets interesting for me is like, to increase the throughput or the velocity requires two things. You have to lower the cost of production, lower the risk, lower the cost of an experiment, lower the cost of content. Otherwise, it scales linearly and you're not increasing your ROI, right? Because then you're just layering on people and assuming the same kind of ROI per page. You're not making any incremental revenue, right? You're just increasing costs with that. And then it also assumes a quality bar, because there's going to be a management problem, which is as soon as you expand out how much you're creating, how many experiments you're running, you can imagine the left side of the spectrum being, we have no quality control. Mm-hmm. Anybody in our company can, create an Optimizely account, set them an experiment. They don't have to have development experience. They're going to fuck up the site. Like, it's going to be an absolute disaster. Or everything has to run through one person who is PhD level expert in this field, and this is completely bottlenecked, and there's no way we're going to decentralize it. So I think those two, when we talk about the velocity question, have to be inherent with content as well. Mm-hmm. And that's where you get into some of the AI stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That's one feasible way to like kind of lower the marginal cost per page.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating is, as with most things we do, there's no one way to do things. Like, it's really a bet that you're deciding to take, or like a philosophy in how you want to approach these problems. Like, to give more context on the client I'm thinking about, not only do they want to increase output, they're barely increasing budget, they're getting no new headcount, and they're going to be translating to 6 other languages using AI. Like, a lot of it is AI, and we're talking a lot about QA processes and all of that. But it's interesting to kind of have the two contrasting bets, right? Like, one is going to bet on lower velocity, like significantly lower, like 4 or 5 new pages a month, but like high quality stuff. That it's coming from the mouth of who the ICP is. The other is, we are not subject matter experts. We know enough to QA this stuff. And like, we have AI workflows to fact check. We have AI workflows to edit, to QA and all this stuff. And they're going for velocity, which they're doing really well. So it's hard to give. I can see why you're like saying like it depends, because there's no one right answer. It's just what's the philosophy on how we want to run this project, and is there leadership buy-in? Like, for the client I'm talking about for velocity, leadership's bought in. They're like, you're not getting budget, and we expect this amount of output and these results. Do what you need to do. Like, we don't expect you to make it all perfect, right? So it comes down from leadership on, here's how we're going to navigate this situation and why we believe this is the best bet.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the constraints that lead into the strategic decision to take the velocity versus non-velocity bet. And in my mind, there's like, one of those is sort of the ceiling in terms of like how much reach or surface area is your potential. So in a content or a SEO sphere, that could be like the overall search TAM or the amount of coverage you could expect to, hit diminishing returns or diminishing marginal utility. In some spaces, like in a very nascent category creation space with like, let's actually use like an example that's extreme, like somebody who sells to airlines and airlines alone. you have 100 max companies you could work with. So it wouldn't necessarily make sense to publish 10,000 pages because, I mean, there's just diminishing marginal utility. So after like 50 or 100 pages, you're hitting every question that those 100 airlines have versus, a horizontal no code app builder that could work with like restaurants, that could work with agencies, that could work with tons of different people. You can potentially hit like a much larger ceiling. And then there's the sort of risk exposure, which is like what goes wrong in the event that you publish 1,000 pages. And, there's like spam and SEO penalties. That aside, I'm thinking again from the analogous like experimentation angle. If you have booking.com, which is like the gold standard for like decentralized experimentation, not to say they don't have a brand, they do. But there's less risk if you run a test on a piece of copy on the confirmation page versus like if you're Salesforce and you're testing copy on the headline on the homepage or even like a more nascent example like Profound, right? It's a very competitive space. There's tons of products coming out every day, and how your position and messaging sits within that ecosystem matters a lot more than the conversion rate that day that you run the experiment. So those would fit into my set of constraints that would say, all right, we're going to take this approach that's much more targeted, that's much more quality, that's much more approached more judiciously. And in other cases, I'm like, all right, we're much more, there's a lower risk of doing something wrong. Therefore, we can kind of expand our approach.
Yeah, the search TAM lens, I think, goes kind of in parallel in a way to the growth stage framework that I was talking through, like foundation, scale, leadership. We use that language, but generally just like where are you on your growth journey? How well known is your brand? And also how many people are you selling to? Because I'm thinking about like some assumptions I would make from the more intentional, like quality-based, slower, intentional. I said intentional, but you know what I'm saying? That play tells me that your brand is known and you're potentially trying to steal business now and not sell into net new. So I wouldn't say it's maybe a defensive play, but now you're looking to bring over business, which also tells me that maybe she's also investing in case studies or someone else's too. Because when I'm thinking of like what in-house content writers do I know, just in-house fully that are working on just a myriad of different content, and I'm really close with the case study writer at a well-known, I guess they're marketing automation tool. But they are maybe like a set of 5 of the leading tools in the space. Like if I would look for best like marketing automation tool on ChatGPT, probably on most of the list. She's in-house. All she does is write case studies. And I asked her, I was like, does that ever get boring? And she's like, no, because I know my work is used to sell deals, stealing from our competitors. So to me, that's worth the salary because you got someone that's close to the product. She's excellent at her craft. Storytelling is important. She travels to interview people, like all of that. And that is like the KPIs on her work might be a little bit more murky, right? Like, attract traffic and then convert, but it's a purely competitive play. And so not the same exact thing you were talking about, but I can see having very intentional, like content, slower creation. I bet that your friend or your contact expects almost every single piece to be read.
Yeah.
And that was my next question was, what is her distribution process? How is she measuring success? Like, what does that look like?
I don't have answers to those questions, but the assumptions you made are correct. They're a well-known brand in the space. Every recruiter I know loves this product.
Mm-hmm.
We use the product because a recruiter I used to work with recommended it that we use it. And then people on Reddit say that this product's amazing. Their whole thing is for recruiters, built by recruiters, right? So they have this brand recognition and kind of a brand to defend at this point of we're not like the others. And there is pressure, rightfully so, to maintain that, especially if you have that goodwill of your industry.
Yeah. And I think about another client that I worked with where I would say they're like second or third in the list. They're up against this huge incumbent, been around for a long time. But I asked them, I'm like, where do people come from when they come to you? And they're like, from this incumbent, because they've had a couple mishaps the last couple of years, from another competitor or from like nothing. Like they're using like spreadsheets as a competitive alternative. So when I backed into those like buyer journeys, I realized like velocity wouldn't really help in this regard. It wouldn't necessarily hurt except for like the expenditure, but it's more targeted like comparison type and almost brand, I wouldn't say brand defensive, like defending the brand, but focusing on the differentiators, because in that case, a lot of people are really familiar with like what the category is, what the software is, that they need this. Like every company eventually reaches a stage where like, we need this. So when they go to look, they're either looking to switch because they're annoyed or they know what they're looking for. So very infrequently would it be valuable to be like, what is this kind of software or why you need X? So I still think it just comes down to the buyer journey, knowing your audience.
Isn't it wild that the spreadsheet is still everybody's biggest competitor?
That's why when I talk to clients, I don't say, who are your competitors? I say, what are your competitive alternatives? Because it always is, especially for SaaS.
I wonder, back to the content writer question, if you remember in 2021, 22, something like that, Megan Keeney Anderson, who was at Jasper at the time, put out this talk and a blog post based on the talk about how Gen AI would change the allocation of work and what is valuable and what is going to take less time and what is going to take more time. Because in your example of a case study, I just watched Adrian from Verbatim do a little panel with Kraft a couple of weeks ago. And that's all they do. They do customer marketing and case studies. And he talked about the secret ingredients. And what he talked about was largely questions and interviewing. He's like, most people run down a list of questions and they keep moving, but I stop, I pause, and I look for their little eyebrow raise, and then I say, tell me more about that. Or actually dig into that. You mentioned like you used to use spreadsheets. What was painful about that? And I could imagine, I'm curious your take here, because it varies by content type and business and all that. If there's certain things that the content writer is doing, or what was doing before, that may be less valuable or could be sped up by technology, and now where that time is more valuably spent. Questions, interviews, I don't know. Like with a case study, I would imagine you could formulaically create a custom GPT that's like, all right, there's always like, problem, how we helped, and then the results, and you can kind of structure it. So the composition to me would, as a naive person, be easier. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think about like the writing process, at least like in a business setting. I think there's areas that can be like sped up, and then areas that are meant to be more like manual or intentional, and really out of differentiation shouldn't be automated, really. Like the case study production process is different. So I'll speak to like my experience in-house at HubSpot. I would say like the research and the outlining and all of the like, what am I writing about and why? I think that depending on what you're goaled on, so like SEO, we'll say, that can be automated or streamlined, I think. The research process, again, depending on what the topic is, can largely be automated or at least quickened. But the work that I did in this like thought leadership bucket that I sat in, I think spending the time to go talk to the people doing the work that I was writing about is one way I differentiated a lot of the content I created. But I think that is like the one thing that can be manually done. Because like, for example, I was writing, I don't know, top 5 sales strategies or something like that. So like for the most part, you can get a gist of like what's popular out there and what else is trending. And maybe I'd supplement through Reddit. Maybe I'd use my best judgment on what I think would work in sales. But then I'd go talk to the HubSpot sales team and be like, what's working here? And I couldn't automate that, like maybe I'd automated the email to send the sales team, and I automated some Q&A through GPT. But for the most part, having those conversations, digging into the like body language and the cues and getting like verbatim quotes to represent the HubSpot sales team, I think that's what differentiated. But then like editing, QA, CMS uploads, like I think that can all be automated too. So I think there's going to be 20 to maybe 30%, depending on the type of content, that should be like hands-on, manually done. But I would argue most content, most components that go into production can and should be automated.
I have found, and this is not as formulaic as hitting the intent of an SEO article, I've found for myself with writing newsletters. I've not gone into detail on like in which specific ways I use AI. And I don't know if this is the time and place to do that, but I'm, as a writer, not wonderful at outlining and weaving together a holistic narrative where I stay on a through line. I think very parenthetically. Like I'll have a point, and then there's a side point, and then I'll go into that side point, and then I'll have a section that's kind of a subsection, and I tend to get lost in my own kind of thoughts. And maybe that's a me problem, and I need to think more clearly or something like that. But generally, what I do now is I've got a thesis. I've got like a core single sentence idea that I'm trying to drive through. And then I will typically have some reference materials, either talking points on a podcast or sales calls, and I'll upload that to a custom GPT that I've trained on all my past newsletters so it gets the right format. And then it'll come up with a structure where it's almost like a 3-part act or a 5-part essay or something like that with some bullet points from that. And then what I do then is I write, because I like writing, and I think I've got a unique style. And what LLMs are not great at actually is pulling cool references. And, you know, I remember like a quote I read from a book about Abraham Lincoln and how he used the press to his advantage. And, you know, he did X, Y, and Z. And I know that relates to digital PR in today's society because of A, B, and C. So I'll pop those in and I'll spruce it up and make it my own. But for that structure and like forming a cohesive narrative, I found LLMs to be actually a value add for me. Maybe not even a time saver. I don't even know if it saves me time. Like maybe I could just let it rip, sit down, but I think it would be less structured, and I think it would be less readable for the end user.
And I think the part that you're maintaining, like the manual connecting of the dots.
It's also my idea. So I'm not taking like ChatGPT's take on like, you know, SEO. I'm like, I know what I want to say.
And that's your essay.
How do I communicate?
Yes. So I think that is like the part that is manual or kept manual, as I think should be consistent with the value add of the thing that's being created. So like for case studies, the value add is like real customer stories, literal voice of customer, especially when it comes from like if someone's migrating from another tool. I think that's a huge story to tell. Manually retaining that language and getting into the why from a live conversation. And then, letting a trained GPT put it all together, but you've brought all the ingredients in. And I think to like your friend and that team that's moving a little bit slower, you know, if the goal is you're speaking as the ICP, maybe you are addressing a pain point there'd been pattern recognition across Gong of like, we've had 6 sales calls and we've had all these concerns about this one thing or this one process. Like, since you've done this, I'm speaking to the writer, go tell this story. And maybe they've automated like the Gong transcripts and they've pattern connected using GPT, but they've maybe gone and spoken to some of these people too and integrated like the actual voice of customer, not just to resonate with who's reading, but maybe appeal to LLMs because you're trying to match what people are actually prompting. So in that case, that could be tied to like the KPI of this project or the value add or the purpose. And I think that's the component of the work that should be kept precious, like kept creative, and then let GPT help you with the things that you're not good at or that maybe help you speed things up so you can hit your output goals or something like that. So
actually on that point on GPT helping, I'm thinking now about like the artisanal, you know, quality focused one. I would expect to have similar, I guess, like ROI or leverage on the effort that I'm putting into something. So even if I'm creating one asset versus 20, I would actually expect the same return if it takes the same time and costs. And I'm wondering if there's like, let's get specific. So 20 blog posts versus one original research project. Let's say the original research takes 20x the cost and time. So you could do either of those across 1 month or 1 quarter, whatever that time period is. The formatting of those, if you just did the original research, took all that time where you could have done 20 blog posts, you're looking at opportunity costs and trade-offs now. If you just publish the original research in a 2,000-word blog post in the same format as what you could have done with those 20 that, you know, you could have taken the time with the one, you know, trade-off there. Is it necessary now to leverage GPT to repurpose that and get as much kind of like mileage from that as possible? Like now, should it be the content writer or content marketer's job to take that asset, you know, punch that up into LinkedIn posts for your executive team to post about, pull it into a webinar, you know, transcript to run gated content ads, against remarketing audiences. Like, do you want the same mileage from that single artisanal, high quality targeted asset? And my answer, like as an executive, is yes. What do you think?
I'm going a bunch of different angles, but I think what stands out to me is that one very thoughtful 20x the amount of effort and investment thing probably required a lot more thoughtful effort than 20 really quickly published blog posts. That's an assumption I'm going to make for this model. And what's required is like that effort that goes into the 20x is probably something that wasn't just formed from asking a ChatGPT, like, what should this research report be about? Like someone had to have an idea and a thesis, and then they went and maybe used AI or something to go research and help form that thesis and like decide what direction to take, or like take inputs and think through the trade-offs or specific things to ask in that research. And where my mind goes is we're going to continue to have this conversation of like, just because it should be automated or it can be done by AI doesn't mean it should be. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot about these examples of lawyers citing like cases that never even existed, where, okay, maybe if you do that, sure, use AI to try to find these, but confirm it's real, confirm that if it is real, that it aligns with the case that you're trying to make for your trial or whatever. And I know at least when it comes to producing these articles, like I just recently wrote an article like from beginning to end for the first time in a while. And I used AI to support with all of it. But what I started off with was, what are my thoughts that I have before I go to ChatGPT and say like, help me write a blog post about this topic or something, and just take that and run with it. And it forces you to think about like, what do I have to say about this thing that I think will resonate with people, versus just having an AI like regurgitate a bunch of stuff that maybe I've heard other people say. And it comes back to, like, we talk about this with our strategy team of, hey, if you're doing foundational research about the company, don't just ask ChatGPT what this company does or what the product does. Like, go sign up for the product, go try to use it, go read what they have to say about their ICP, go review the documentation, maybe use like a notebook LM to summarize it, sure, like a little bit, but go confirm that your foundational understanding on which you're going to build all this strategy and work is accurate, and you can defend it and explain it to someone else, versus just relying on like a summarization engine for these things. So back to the question of like, does it take, like, do you expect this thing to take 20x the amount of?
No, actually, let me rephrase. I think I didn't frame the question correctly. So let's assume that it does take that much extra effort, and it could be original research. It could be like a well-designed asset as opposed to just like using your templated style. The question is more so like, would you expect commensurate repurposing work to really leverage that into an integrated campaign? Yes. As opposed to, like, let's say the 20 blog posts is part of an integrated campaign, but it's purely for SEO, versus if you've got this beautiful asset that's like well designed or researched, or like really hitting on the target, voice of customer, all the stuff you talked about. Would you then want as a leader to see that stretched out a little farther than your single blog post?
All right, we published this thing, we're done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's kind of the question that I'm going for. And then, the secondary one is, can you use air ops to, help chip that off into those,
Yeah. To be completely candid, this was a big learning opportunity for me, because I come from a very particular approach to like growth and marketing, where I had this channel to focus on, or like this part of the product that I need to optimize, or something in product management. And when I met with folks who were like integrated marketing managers or like campaign managers, I'm like, what does that mean? And then once I saw this in action of, we have this key pillar or like message we want to communicate, and then we're going to have these different assets. This is what we're going to present at events and what our booths are going to look like. These are webinars we're going to run. These are podcast talking points. Here's a white paper we're going to have to support it. I realized that all of that was like, there's more than just publishing content on a website and expecting Google to distribute or AI to distribute it. It's like that marketer who's managing an entire campaign is like, how do I take this message and get it across all channels in all formats, across the sales team, across the client success team or customer success team, across our social, across our webinars and email. I do believe that if you're going to be putting that amount of investment in one thing, you should be doing all of that stuff. It shouldn't just sit in one place.
If I was that writer, I would want it to be. I wouldn't I would want it to be so valuable that it was reformatted for different channels, summarized using GPT, because like I would trust and believe in the foundation that I created to then inform the repurposing. Like I'm not these people, but like I did create this stuff and I was like, please get it out there, because like not only is it's really fucking cool, like I worked so hard on this, but it helps diversify like the people finding it.
I think too that it's really interesting because we talk about AI search and the different tactics or strategies that play into this. And this phrase came to mind, consonants, right? It's like cohesion versus coverage. And in LLMs, it's like you're not necessarily just taking one source as a source of truth. You're really like integrating a bunch of different source materials and hoping for like some sense of cohesion around how your brand is talked about or your product is talked about. And with the integrated marketing approach, you build that cohesion inherently because you've got this seed asset or this pillar that then gets punched up into outreach campaigns that are mentioned in the media, that then gets pushed into organic social thought leadership. Whether or not that directly influences LLM outputs or indirectly, because then people associate you with this concept and then they write about you. But you're really taking one central idea and disseminating that outwards, and everything is integrated and cohesive, which to me would build more of a perception-based approach. And by that, I mean, not just how are you showing up in LLMs, but like, how are you showing up in LLMs? Like not how often, but like how. What is it writing about you? Whereas the coverage question would be for me, it would be a company that has very little visibility and needs to expand their surface area and hit on those touch points to even be included in the conversation. So it's a different strategy, I think.
Why the velocity play, I assumed kind of right down the middle, because like the really long form creative, considering these are like an either or, some teams do both or variations of both, but the bigger, longer, more creative ICP driven pieces, that to me tells me the team has put in the time and work to figure out like, how do we show up? Do people know who we are and what we do? And have we built the foundation and have we scaled? And now we have a purpose of defending the brand, and people care about what we think and what we think about like the people that we sell to and our product and the role that it plays. And for the recruiting software, like our ethos around hiring and interviewing and like all these nuanced things. But the velocity play, like you can't feasibly put in that much effort and time into 700 pieces into delicately fine tuning the message that you're telling. That's my belief. Like maybe there's a core set of 50 that you're like, this purpose of these pieces is for that. But at that velocity, at that output, it is more about covering surface area, establishing presence, defining who we are and what we do and who we sell to, and growing visibility and coverage. I think for what it's worth, you can, but it's very, very difficult to do so as you increase the scale. And that's where there was this old problem that Matt Gershoff would talk about with personalization, when it was suddenly hot to do like one-to-one mass scale dynamic personalization. And he's like, well, that's all fun and games until you realize there's a management cost to that. As soon as you like have to fish out which personalization arm resulted in a customer having a poor experience, and you suddenly have no governance or visibility on which experience they saw during the checkout, that's a complication. Or once you change, your brand and style or your messaging within those 700 content pages, how do you go audit, build an inventory, and figure out which sections of which page you have to update to suddenly reposition yourself, given your category changed or something like that? Whereas it's much simpler when you have 12 very, very comprehensive and cohesive assets through the course of a year. There's a tighter control. You can do it. It's just very hard, I think. You also said this one project is highly enabled by AI. So there might be a way to train on, here's our brand, whatever, and then make sure it's a through line in all of the output. But I would imagine those long form content pieces, assets, whatever you call them, that's part of the establishing and the dissemination of a core message, whereas those 700 pieces are just like echoes of that. Like you have a different point, like a what is or how to, and you want to make sure like the message is consistent, but that what is or how to piece is not the core announcement of the thing or the establishment of the idea. You know, like an original research piece or a long form piece of content, that might be like the thing that tells the world about this thing that we believe. Whereas those blogs are likely just, you know, we might include a quote from that or resonate the core message. So it doesn't have to be as thoroughly done or, you know, detail oriented. I'm losing my train of thought.
I hate
but
to use this
you know,
discrepancy. It's overused, but it's almost like the dichotomy between demand creation and demand capture.
Yeah.
So in the 700 pages example, you have to assume that there's demand and you're just capturing it. Right?
Exactly.
It already exists, and you're planting a flag and saying like, I'm here, right? I've got a page for this. I'm going to show up in Google. I'm going to show up in an LLM. That already exists. Whereas the other one, you're sort of like bringing your worldview to the world, or you're bringing your point of view, or like some new take or paradigm that hopefully incurs some level of interest. So it's a little bit of a different approach from a marketing standpoint.
I might be taking us in a different direction, but this talk about the asset having a lot more coverage than, say, like these 20 pages that might just focus on this one channel got me thinking about our conversation of what department owns being found in AI search and what do teams look like. Because when we talked about the campaign and all different channels where a message needs to be distributed, you know, webinars, white papers, blog posts, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the other social channels, Reddit, and how all that gets summarized, like aggregated and summarized through like a single ChatGPT response about a brand or something. I'm thinking, well, there doesn't really seem to be one particular department who should own all that to contribute to AI. It should be more of, should not every department be thinking about how is what I'm doing going to influence how we appear in AI search? Because I can imagine a world where top down, it says, hey, for the next 6 months, this is our main message leading up to our annual conference or whatever. This is what we want to put out. Like, yes, we were presented this way by AI search historically, but for the next 6 months, if anyone asks about our brand, this is how we need to show up and a messaging that needs to be communicated out, whether it's being directed by the comms team or PR team or product marketing. If they ask about our product, this is what we are right now. Like, this is the campaign. And in one world, I can think of one person trying to coordinate all of that. Like maybe it's a VP of demand or VP of comms or brand that manages all of that. But then it goes into these different channels that are actually usually traditionally managed by demand gen. So I'm going to pose the question of, is that a feasible view of this? Because in another conversation we had, it was like, if all of us are responsible, no one's responsible. So where does this land?
My problem, that's the most interesting question. There's many interesting questions about AI search, but that one, we have to build a new worldview almost. And my silly flippant answer is that like the CMO should own this. It's like, oh yeah, okay. But like if you think about AI visibility or brand visibility, AI is a composite of all the components of your marketing and your off-page perception and your customer experience. That's really the only person who has, I guess, the ability to mandate the different departments to work together in cohesion and have a KPI that's shared, because you're going to have a team that's relatively focused on web, whether it's web strategy, and usually that includes sort of an SEO, CRO, product management side. Sometimes product marketing will be included there. Product marketing is sometimes integrated with brand. Like every org is going to work differently, but there's going to be an owned web presence. And then there's going to be creative, which tends to be like content, video, any of the sort of assets you're creating that back into the positioning and messaging that product marketing and brand is forming. And then there's off page, which is going to be like comms or PR, which is clearly influential in the LLM world. None of those in isolation can move the needle. Well, they could move the needle, but like they need this orchestra effect of everybody working in tandem. Because if the off page team is getting, like irrelevant brand mentions or driving a message that, the product marketing team, if there's a difference between like the product pages that are coming out on the website and the comms and PR team and what they're driving, off page, there's going to be a discrepancy in how the models talk about you. So yeah, that's where it's like flippantly like, oh, the CMO owns it. But like, with the growth team, remember that concept? It was like, all right, we need to marry product management with marketing. So we're going to create this composite team that works across both, and we're going to call it a growth team. Like, is there a need to have a sort of like AI visibility team who owns that metric, because SEO is going to own other stuff other than AI visibility, and comms and PR is going to own other stuff outside of AI visibility.
Mm-hmm.
So you almost need somebody who integrates all of that and is accountable for the metric and kind of works in tandem with the teams who can execute on it.
Yeah, it's like the next evolution of what a growth team looks like, I guess, because I think it was Elena Verna who wrote this article about how like the way growth teams used to work don't really work anymore because of what AI enables now. Even the way that product design engineering teams work is very different, right? Like product manager can kind of do some development and design really quickly now, and three can overlap a ton. Whereas now the overlap is more of, hey, we as a group in these different functions contribute to this one goal. And just because I'm doing my job doesn't mean like our collective KPI is going to be met. And in my experience, a lot of marketing teams function in silos. Like I remember SEO didn't work with paid marketing or didn't share notes of what was working. And I still see that in some companies, or like PR is off doing their thing and then paid's doing their thing. And now it seems like what you're saying, Alex, is whether it be those teams as a collective or just like a representative from each team coming together to say, here's what my team is doing, aligning and making sure that it's all cohesive.
I actually would say probably like an individual, depending on the size of the company and, you know, all that. I would say it's probably can start with one person to sit alongside all of these teams and own Profound, own voice of customer research, which would require alignment with sales and customer success, develop the prompts, figure out baseline, figure out citations and inputs and what might be missing from like a content production and optimization perspective. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to meet with our content team and I'm going to have this conversation, and they're going to continue doing what they're doing, but they need to understand they need to do it this way, or this set of pages needs something like, I don't know all the specifics. And then maybe the next day you meet with the Reddit or the off-page team. The next day you sit down with PR and comms. And so it's kind of like one brain, you know, or set of brains that's owning this number, but you're leveraging the teams that have proven success across all these tactics and channels, but you're giving them, like, providing counsel on how they do their jobs to then support your number. And how that looks, I don't know. I mean, you obviously can't go like ignore your number and fit my number, but there's got to be ways that they coincide. So I think it actually can start with an individual, because I know the last time we talked about this, I said committee. I don't think that's actually a good idea anymore. But having an individual working cross-functionally, and then maybe that team grows depending on what needs to be done.
I think you're right. And I had a role like that at HubSpot. It wasn't AI visibility, obviously, because this was like 2018 or 2017. But I was tasked with growing freemium user base. And I would basically, I was not on the SEO team, and I was not on the paid acquisition team, and I was not on the product team. So I would have to kind of work into your roadmap, which is like not an easy job, especially if you have, this is why it has to be inherently intertwined with like marketing leadership at the CMO level. Because if your KPIs that you're mandating of the SEO team are in conflict with the AI visibility metrics, you're going to have a bad time. You know, if you pizza when you French fry, you're going to have a bad time. But I would basically build partnerships, and I had, you know, a lot of buy-in, and I was doing minimum viable experiments and saying like, oh, hey, like when we do this, it seems to work. If we do this 100x, it's going to work better. Right. And that role is very hard.
Oh yeah. I mean, it requires a lot, like you said, of like, and especially right now with AI search, there's an education component. Hey, can I come sit down with your team? I need to teach you about this thing that I've been tasked with. Here's how it works. And here's where your surface area, your real estate fits in, and what I might need from you. And like, let's figure out a way to both get what we need or make happen what we need. And I think, you know, this brings us to what we do. And I think that we're in a really interesting position as a agency, as consultants, as strategic partners. Like, it's a little bit harder, you know, being on the outside looking in, but you know, we've had some clients where we've sat down with their not legal, PR and comms teams, which there might be a legal component depending on what the channel is, sat down with paid, sat down with just all the different inputs depending on the maturity of their team. And I mean, I think that's what teams are looking for, is like, who's owning this, you know, especially marketing leadership. I mean, again, it depends on the size of the company, but that's just one more thing for the CMO to do. It's appealing to bring in an outside or an additional expert and have them figure out how to pull all the pieces together.
I think you need to have somebody own that number, though. I think you're onto something.
This reminds me of, like, speaking of our experience at HubSpot, it's interesting because you had that kind of role amongst the marketing team. I was that squeaky wheel who was like, I think we need to work more closely with product, and I think we can build these growth loops, which, is not really innovative anymore. I think we need to build this to the product. And same as what you said, I had to go to every product manager, get on the roadmap and be like, here's what I want to do. Here's the experiment. Here's how I'm going to track success. Here's why it's important. I had to go to the managers and be like, I'm talking to your team. I'm trying to do this thing. Talk to my manager because he's on the same page. And then eventually over time, start communicating to the marketing team and to product leadership. Like, here is the outcome of our work together through working with these different product managers and like how we can actually contribute, like communicate our value. And I can see an analogous situation to someone internally where maybe a lot of marketing teams are feeling a lot of uncertainty and even leadership isn't really entirely sure what this looks like, but there's that one person, guy or gal or they, who wants to own this thing and then go be that squeaky wheel and get on all these marketing teams' roadmaps of like, hey, this is a thing coming down from the CMO. Like, I'm supporting it. And like, it's a small thing that's kind of an iteration of what you're currently doing, but like, can I just add this another layer on top of it? And goes to like the outreach teams, like, hey, just make sure like this is how we want the product to be positioned in your outreach or whatever, because we want to make sure that it's presented correctly in AI visibility. And it goes to the SEO team or like whoever, like the web dev team, and says, hey, experimental, but let's try doing some schema markup here. So they kind of needs to be like you said earlier, Ali, like a jack of all trades who can come in,
like a libero.
Understand things.
I was going to bring this back in, the T-shaped marketers back in fashion.
Oh God.
Now I'm biased because that's how I always modeled myself. And I think I've built my career on that idea that I'm very broad, but I also go deep in data experimentation and SEO. But I can speak to paid teams. And I think that's the main thing. It's a little concerning with, I think SEO has largely taken the AEO mandate under their remit. And we've got some research coming out. It's not out yet, so I can't say what the findings are, but like early findings are like a significant percentage of SEO jobs are now including AI search.
I mean, you've seen the title change on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
SEO, AEO growth, SEO,
so we have
AI
actual
search.
data coming out on this, and I don't know the exact percentage, but it's, let's say, a majority.
Yeah.
Which does make sense. I think Noah on our podcast, Noah from Stacker, said this. He's like, the person needs to be analytically capable. They need to understand like what visibility means, how that relates to citation sources, how this fits into the attribution system we've got. They have to have an analytical structure. And that's why SEO is pretty solid, because they're used to reporting on that level. But if you just contain yourself to SEO and you're not a T-shaped marketer with the broad experience or at least ability to communicate, what happens when you come up against a PP, like a paid listing on Capterra that's incredibly influential? You're like, I got to talk to the paid team and speak the language of unit economics and CAC and like how this plays into like AI visibility and how that funnels down into attribution. And then I have to also explain, hey, with our comms, like we are working on this original research, like how can we get this in these publications? Like these are the target publications. They're not as prominent as the ones you're going after. You're going after the New York Times. They're not showing up in the citation sources. Can you go after this random blog?
Yeah.
You have to have that person who can kind of,
and someone who's ready for an uphill battle, because we have a client who they've got the coolest community that they've built, and the community team will not leverage them because they don't feel comfortable asking anything of them. And I'm talking like, just encourage them to go leave a review, go post on Reddit, like go do the thing that they do in the internal gated forum. But that's not seeding anything because it's gated. And so you've got these silos who are doing important work, but it's like, let's leverage the resources that we already have and the time that each of you have already put into your craft and take a little piece of that pie and help it serve this one number, this one project that will support all of us and support growth, which is why marketing leadership is so important. So you have that backing you. Like, I was sent here by the CMO, sorry to piss you off, but we really need you to ask like your top 50 advocates to go post on G2. Like, we haven't had a review on G2 in 2 years. Like, I can't go fabricate that. That's the beauty of a review site. But like, we already have these people that are in the tool. They love it. They use it every day. Instead of just whipping up all these ChatGPT reviews and somehow figuring out to get them on, because that doesn't feel good. Let's just leverage what we've already built. But yeah, it's an educational thing. It's a selling, like you have to sell it internally. And probably annoy some people, but I think that's easier than having kind of one person from each team coming in and then collectively owning, if everyone owns it, no one owns it kind of thing.
Exactly. And I do think it's important to say that this has to be pretty executive level exposure, because it's kind of cool, actually. It's like at the CMO level, like you have these metrics like lagging indicators like market share, and you've got share of voice and share of search and branded search. It was a little difficult to say how like SEO traffic, non-branded SEO traffic fits into this. But assuming that you've chosen a proper set of prompts that actually approximate like what your industry is talking about and like how you would show up, and you've got a comprehensive set of those over a time period, it's actually a very trustworthy bellwether of your status in the market. Your visibility in relation to competitors, your sentiment, what's a pro, what's a con, where that data is coming from. So it gives you, as an executive, a whole lot of information about your weak spots, your strong suits, like everything that kind of builds into the composite of your market presence.
Yeah.
So I do think it can't be off, in a corner on like a ragtag team that's like, oh, we're the AI team. It's got to be executive level, I think, in reporting structure.
It's going to be a new era of working together, I think, for these teams, because like we have a client, I keep saying that. Sentiment on Reddit is not great. And yeah, we can post the brand name all day or help encourage conversation among these subreddits all day. But unless there is activity through their branded Reddit, namely through product experts coming in and helping answer questions, like doing so very much in a helpful way, not promotional, that's going to require collaboration between the Reddit team or the off-page team and the product team. So it's like, it's not only just the AI person helping pull all of these efforts together, but then them working together themselves. Like PR and comms might need support from content, vice versa. I don't know other combinations, but that just came to mind too, because the Reddit person or the off-page person probably isn't the best equipped to speak to the super nuanced pain point when it comes to the product or answer, a customer success issue too.
I do keep coming back to this T-shaped thing, because there's like a level of experimentation in what you're talking about too. It's not like you're a proven expert in a given domain. It's like there's going to be some set of like skills with the cross-functional kind of, executive presence and ability to communicate and get buy-in. But there's also this model that like, the dust hasn't settled on how any of this is working. And even company to company and product line to product line, things can shift so much in terms of like what tactics you would need. So to have the ability to run, sets of parameterized experiments is also, it's a hard role. The more we're talking about this, I'm like, who is this person?
And not only does like the marketing leadership need to back this person, but they also need to accept that this might not work. Like, hey, a lot of this experimental, we have reason to believe it'll work. But if for whatever reason these tactics don't work, like those are a lot of different teams who are like taking input from this person for an experimental thing that might impact their work. And so there are various teams that might feel like it's risky for them to work with this random person who's doing this AI stuff. Like, what if this impacts my goals? Like this is going to take a lot of time, maybe. And then if it doesn't work, then the marketing leadership needs to know how to communicate and frame it as like, hey, this is a process. Like, we're figuring it out right now still. So there is a lot of what you said, Alex, around like the executive communication and presence of framing it as a bet, not guaranteeing results, and saying like using the MVP framework, for example, of these are tests. Like, what's a minimum viable test to validate whether this is something to continue investing in? What are success metrics? What are leading indicators we're looking for before we decide to say, hey, we're going to hire a full-time person to go do this? Because ultimately, in my experience, that's what this growth T-shaped person would do. They'd validate new channels or new tactics. And then once it's validated, make the case to invest a lot more. So there's a couple of different layers to this. And that person needs to be willing to step on toes and like maybe piss some people off to get this thing done and push it through.
I do think like if I were in-house, this would be career advice is so hard to give out. But like if you're really like a domain expert and you want to go deep into something like technical SEO, like this probably wouldn't be the path. And then there's like a management route where you're like building teams and like, managing performance and all of that. But if I were in house, like this is the point at which whatever role I was in, whether I was like in SEO or whatever, even if it was like seemingly irrelevant, I would be like raising my hand and I'd be like procuring, an AI visibility tool and just showing like, oh, hey, did you realize that like we're behind this competitor in this way?
Mhm.
And like, I would totally use this as an opportunity to like leverage, greater exposure in the organization. And there's a lot of downsides too. Like we're saying, like there's a lot you don't have direct control over. So you're kind of putting your ass on the line for some stuff. But like, I look at this as like a pretty solid ladder to climb. And it's kind of like open game. It's like nobody has truly claimed it yet. So that's what I would be doing if I were in house.